Edge, Season 8, Episode 7. Guess who our guest is this week? It's Liz Faraim. She's not only going to help us with the review, she's actually our seated guest, and she only learned that 5 seconds ago.
Surprise!
Yeah, that's how my brain goes sometimes. But, Liz, let's take this opportunity to show people what you've been up to. I mean, your Chastain novels are coming along swimmingly. You've got 3 out now, right?
That's correct. I do have 3 out right now. It was originally planned as a trilogy. However, I am almost finished writing the 4th book of this trilogy. Yes. So it is carrying. Vivian's story continues.
Sweet. So we're going to get more from our...
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just want to say the muses have their own thoughts. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, right.
They do. And also some of my readers commented after the end of book 3, we can't wait to see what happens next. And I was like, wait, there is no next, but I guess now there is. So here we go.
All right. So for listeners who are only hearing about this for the first time, let's tell them about the progression that this beautiful polyamorous lesbian has had through the course of your novels.
So the story is told from the perspective of Vivian Chastain. She, in the first book, Canopy, has come out of the military. She's dealing with reintegrating into a civilian life, struggling with some PTSD, and just learning how to operate in the world again, and going to college, getting into a relationship, plural relationships.
Photobomb!
Yes, sorry. Multiple relationships, dealing with polyamory, and she's just trying to find a way to have a sort of a calm, normal, quiet life, and that is not what the world has in store for her. So she goes on some adventures, struggles with some mental health issues, gets some help, and then it carries on into book 2, Stitches and Sepsis, and then book 3, which is Concussion and Contentment.
So tease me about book 4. Anything you can share, no spoilers, and obviously no promises. We know it all changes.
She becomes a serial killer and then she goes off.
I'll say that she has a career change, which is already shown at the end of book 3. And she, in book 4, is going through Fire Academy and is a probationary firefighter and learning what that's all about, as well as being a woman in the fire service, which has its own set of challenges.
Very cool. And end of 2022, you also took part in Bakwa's group project, the horror book, right?
Oh, yes. So we had, at the end of 2022, we had an anthology come out. It was our second anthology. The title of it is 2, because it's a second book, and it was 2022. So the theme of that one was 2. In 2021, our anthology was the horror book. So I had tried my hand at writing short stories, which is new for me, but I had a lot of fun with both of those projects.
And it's really kind of funny how we discovered that she has quite the horror streak that nobody anticipated when we did the first one. We were like, wow, she went dark.
Yeah. I did. I didn't know I had it in me, but there it was.
Very cool. All right, so folks who want to keep up with what you're doing need to go to lizfaraim.com, LIZFARAIM.com, hit you on the socials, pick up some of these books, enjoy the reads. Anything else you want to say about where your writing career is headed before we dive into the review?
I do actually have another standalone novel coming out that's not a Vivian story. It's a new character named Randy Cox, and it tells her story. Blue-collar worker in the East Bay, and she gets into some trouble too. So that's due out. I don't have a release date yet, but probably sometime around March.
That's
now,
awesome.
There's one thing I do want to add briefly before we move on. I have to say how incredibly rewarding it's been to watch Liz progress from the first reading she was at when we did in Sacramento, and Liz walked up with her pages in her hand and she was trembling and the flop sweat and everything. And now she's a polished author. It's been great to watch that.
Thank you, Baz.
Awesome. All right, on to our review. Dun, dun, dun. Tell It to the Bees 2018. Baz, you want to tell people about it?
Oh, I don't have it up.
All
Sorry.
right, fine, I can do it. In 1950 small town Britain, a doctor develops a relationship with her young patient's mother. Dun dun dun. I didn't know what to expect from this. It was a film that Liz suggested we watch. I'm glad she did. I saw several
Hmm.
faces I recognized from elsewhere, including Anna Paquin. I was like, Anna Paquin did this? Like, what? So, thank you very much for the suggestion. Liz, what do you want to say about
Yeah,
it?
it was great.
Welcome.
It was quite a gift. Thank you.
Well, I guess I can jump in with it. I would say there are some sort of content warnings for this film, including sexual assaults, intimate partner violence, and without using the A word, forced removal of a fetus. Sorry, that's a hard word
Mm-hmm.
this morning. But the story, it is narrated and sort of told from the perspective of a character named Lydia's son. His name's Charlie. And he is witnessing his mother struggling in a town that's not hers, left by her husband. She's kind of down and out and really struggling. And Charlie is, in his own way, as a 10-year-old, trying to tear his mom up and do what he can to help her. Meanwhile, the doctor, Jean, she returns to her hometown. She's a bit of an outcast and isolated on her return. And then they connect through the son, Charlie. And I would say that these two, who are sort of both having a rough time, come together and bring out the best in each other. And it's a fantastic pairing. I would say that the two cast members have some believable chemistry. What else do I want to say? It definitely, in some cases, the film tries to do too much to address maybe some of the 1950s post-war social issues
Mm-hmm.
all at once.
But that's how
The
small
screenwriters, I think, do a
towns
decent.
are in that. I mean, you don't get to say, "Oh, let's all focus on this." It's kind of comes at you like a train. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I will say that the screenwriters did do a good job of, while throwing a lot in there, they did a good job of making it all fit in the storyline, and it all was interwoven very well. What was
Mm-hmm.
happening?
Yeah.
I do understand that the novel. This is based on a novel, and Fiona Shaw, I think, is the author.
Mrs.
The
Dursley,
novel had a different ending.
Fiona Shaw's, yeah,
Mrs. Dursley.
Mrs. Dursley in Harry
Oh,
Potter. That's Fiona Shaw. Staunch lesbian, lovely lady.
wonderful.
Yes.
Her novel did have a different ending than the film. And it seemed like an odd choice to me for the screenwriters to do what they did, because it does drastically alter the outcome of Jean and Lydia's relationship compared to what happens in the
Can
novel.
I ask what happens in the novel?
They stay together in the novel. Spoiler for the movie.
Yeah, no,
They don't stay
one
together
of
in the
my
movie.
comments actually was going to be about the ending, so I was going to spoil the movie a little bit anyway. Before we get there, though, the climactic scene where Dr. Jean is helping save the cousin's life. She's cousin, right?
Yes, her cousin. Hmm.
Yeah, so Jean
Yes.
has come to the household where everybody hates her because of who she is and what she is, but she's still saving this young woman's life. Meanwhile, Charlie's mom is having that fight with her husband, and Charlie goes to the bees. My horror brain honestly thought we were going to lose Charlie to a bee attack in that scene. I was so terrified that the bees weren't going to respond mystically and that they were just going to attack him for banging on the hive. I thought we were going to lose the boy. I was like, no, no, no. Yeah.
Oh
And,
no.
again, it's 1950s, already a movie about one, the hardship women faced in that era in small towns. too, about being queer and different in that era. I was really anticipating the worst from that ending. I'm glad my anticipation was wrong. 100% glad it was wrong. I really thought in that moment we were going to lose Charlie to a bee attack. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, sort of the thread for Charlie throughout this whole thing is as he's coming to understand the adults in the world and his place in the world, Dr. Jean had told him to tell his secrets to the bees because that would keep the bees here and they wouldn't swarm
And
away.
she has a collection of
And
beehives.
she's a beekeeper.
Yeah.
She inherited her father's property, which had existing beehives, but she's a beekeeper, and she's
Yeah.
teaching Charlie the art. And so throughout the film, though, you get a lot of his narrative and his perspective through what he's telling the bees. So the bees are an integral part of the story because they are, in some ways, the audience for.
And I will say one of my favorite lines in the whole film was when Charlie was speaking to the bees, and it's right after Lydia and Jean are first connecting, and he tells the bees, "My mom laughed," because she'd been so down and out and upset and crying most of the time up until that point, and now there's some joy in her life, and he's happy for her, and he tells the bees.
But I still couldn't. Like I said, I wasn't prepared. The film had been so real up till that point. I was not prepared for the mystic ending we got, and so I was terrified. Terrified when he started banging on the hives, calling for help.
I never really got. I didn't think it was going to go that way. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just never went there horror wise. I kind of already felt that Charlie had worked up enough of a rapport that I didn't think that was going to be the deal. I literally thought that they would sense his
Anxiety.
no, not anxiety, his complete being distraught and that he needed help. And I actually got that because of what they set up, where he had taken the piece of flint and he was tapping it against the side of the hive, as if he were communicating his own pattern to them. So I kind of got, and to tie it to a different movie altogether that also deals with a lesbian relationship, I kind of saw the connection to Iggy in Fried Green Tomatoes. And I think there's a good correlation. It's kind of, I see this as kind of the British version of that kind of a story. And which I think is really interesting because they're both written by prominent lesbian writers. And I think that it's kind of an interesting second side of the same coin, so to speak, both dealing with societal issues, both dealing with race issues, both dealing with feminist issues, and both dealing with queer issues. I think that these two mirror each other in very, very clear ways. And I think it's interesting that both center on bees, which to me kind of seems like the metaphor of the bees actually being the more responsible society. And yet we kind of consider them to be something subservient to us, where we think of ourselves as superior. And yet in this case, I think I have to give the bees more credit in a weird way.
Having been attacked by wasps as a child, I have never seen them as subservient.
Well, no, but I'm saying people don't give them. I think Charlie says a line in it where he explains that that if the bees go away, that's the end of civilization. That's what he understands.
Well, yeah,
And I
Dr. Jean
think
told him that.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that gives an elevated status to the bees, and it's kind of mirrored in Fried Green Tomatoes in that way, in the way Iggy works with them. And I think the parallels are kind of interesting, and it didn't really dawn on me that I had felt that way about Fried Green Tomatoes, which, by the way, we gave a review of that. I'll put a link up here for it. Watch it after you watch this episode. But I like the parallels, and that the bees are a focal point for both stories, because I think it shows structure and order in the bee colony. And I think that's something that we as humans often lack, which is why bee colonies tend to be much more productive. and so I kind of like the idea that both these women writers made bees kind of a calming point almost. And I never saw the bees as horror in the way for Charlie. And, and I understand, like I said, I fully understand where you went with this, and I get that. But I never felt that because in both Iggy and Charlie's case, they had already cultivated a connection to the bees that I think was going to support them through each story. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I never felt I was never fearful for him, because I think he had established through his secrets that the bees would be there for him. That's just how I took it.
Understood. In both of those stories, I see the beekeeper, Dr. Jean and or Iggy, as very calm and centered, but they know who they are, which is why they're calm, why they're at peace, why they're at harmony. And the reason I was terrified for Charlie in this story is because at that moment, he was not calm. He was not centered.
Yeah, but like I said, I think he developed his own language with them.
I understand.
So
and that's exactly what they portrayed. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I admitted it up front.
No, I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm just saying, for me, I never felt he was in danger. I was more, my fear for him in that moment was more, will they respond? That was my fear, was that the order and the structure wouldn't permit it.
Well, also, they're not necessarily nocturnal, so there's that too.
Well, there's that too, yeah.
So,
Science.
the love story, I think one of the most tender I have seen. Certainly one of the most caring. The way it's portrayed in the film, again, different than the book, but Dr. Jean's decision at the end to protect them by sending them away showed so much love. It was heartbreaking.
And yeah, in an effort to keep Lydia and Charlie together, she had to give up something very important to her.
Any other thoughts? Liz, you're our expert here because you've read the book too, so...
No, I haven't read the book.
Oh, you just knew what the ending was. Oh, okay.
No, but I'm aware of how it ends, but I have not read it, no.
I kind of want to read it now.
Yeah, I know.
Right, same,
Agreed.
same. I'm compelled to read it.
All right. Well, anything else about this particular film?
I think we should just get to our ratings.
All right. Liz, I'm going to let you go first this time.
Okay. I would give this an overall score based on my other scoring of a 4. I think the screenwriting, I gave about a 3.5. I think I already addressed that earlier. The sound, lighting, and score, I felt was a 4. There wasn't anything amazing, but also not anything jarring or
detracting.
That made me. It didn't distract me. Yeah. Art direction and costuming, I gave a solid 5. I really enjoyed what they did with that, especially with the post-war costuming and I know not costuming, but the car that Dr. Jean drove was really awesome. Yeah, that was great. Casting, also a 5. I think each cast member really, in my opinion, portrayed their roles very strongly, and they were very unique characters and interacted well together. Direction, I give a 3.5. I'm kind of neutral on it. Queer theme, I also gave a 3.5. It's, it wasn't groundbreaking, queer theme. It was enjoyable, but not stellar. And my own personal overall score for this is about a 3.5.
Bess?
Mine are pretty much going to be 4s. Overall, I give it a 5, though. I think the film is necessary. I think it's definitely one people should watch. Screenplay, I'm going to give a 3. Not because I thought that there was anything that didn't need to be there. I think some of it was pacing in the screenplay, not necessarily at the director's fault. So I kind of wish they could have tweaked it a little bit. Sunlighting score, I gave a 5. As with art direction, what I love most about sunlighting score and art direction in this context is that they got the color scheme correct for both the lighting, the art, the set design, the locations, the cost. Everything worked. It was that I call it enriched muted because the colors were strong, but they were muted colors. Do you know what I
Po-
mean? It's
Post-war drab.
yeah, but the colors were there. They were rich, but
Hmm.
it was a muted palette.
Hmm.
So but I thought they nailed it. So 5s for both of those. Cast 5. I think the little boy who George, who played Charlie, phenomenal, and he has eyelashes that a lot of women would kill to have, and he has them naturally. Got the close up on the side of his eye, and I'm like, girl, you should be doing Max Factor commercials. That's all I'm gonna say. And can I just add that his little friend? I have questions about that little boy. He knew what to do with the bra.
With
Yeah,
the
he knew
bra.
what to
Yeah.
do with the bra, and he knew how to work it. So I'm like, okay, Charlie, I'm sensing something there. My little gaydar went off. Direction, I give it a 4. Queer themes, I'm going to say a 4.5. And the reason why is here's my take on queer themes in historical period pieces. A lot of what we've been hearing about in the queer community with the children is that there's a lot of these trigger warnings. Oh, why do they have to be so mean? Oh, blah, 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 blah. But that's the way it was. And I really, it draws my ire up when they want to have historical pieces conform to modern aesthetics and culture. And I hate the rewriting of history. It is what it is. You deal with it. That is what gives you the perspective of how our ancestors, especially within the queer community, how strong we were to persevere and get to where we are now. And the only way the children will really get a perspective on that is to see what we faced in the period where that stuff was coming at us and how we still were resilient enough to strive forward. And so for me, I'm going to give it a 4.5 for queer themes, just because I think it's vastly important in this trigger warning era, in this politically correct and let's name things correctly kind of thing, that when you do historical films or period films, that stuff needs to go out the window. You need to tell the story the way that people lived it in that period. So for the queer themes, for me, this is an important factor in that. And my overall, I'm going to give it a 4.75. I really loved this movie. I cannot thank you enough, Liz, for recommending it.
Awesome.
My
Vance?
Yeah, my numbers across the board were 4s. Because a script screenplay, I was actually a little more generous on that one because it was supposed to show more, I think, about the plight of society and how it affected lives, and it did that very richly, and I really appreciated
Mm.
that. To Baz's point about history being history, we can't whitewash it or we will never grow from it.
Mm-hmm.
This didn't whitewash it. I mean, people were horrible to each other, but there were also moments of kindness, and I think this script showed that really well. Um, I kind of want to bump the casting up to a 4.5, 5, because Anna Paquin brought this really strong, very strong, internally strong character who had so much empathy and kindness that I was surprised. I don't generally expect a lot from her. I mean, between Rogue and Sookie Stackhouse, I'm like, Anna Paquin's fun. This was the first time I watched her as an actress and was like, ooh, she's got something. She's managed to blend these two very disparate concepts into one very harmonious person that I liked watching. So I was very impressed by that as well. And so my personal overall is a 4.5. I'm going to recommend this to people. I know a couple of women who are doing women's studies at the local university. I want them to see this and maybe take it to their class and discuss it. So highly recommend it to everybody.
And the
If you're
book.
what and the book, which I have learned is now something I need to read. Um, Also, if you're watching this video, our video, anytime recent to when it was released, this can be watched on Hulu right now. I don't know how long it will stay on Hulu's roster, but it is
It's
currently
on
on the Hulu.
Freevee too, as well, which is
Is it
IMDb.
freebie? Okay.
That's where I saw it.
So that's what I know about that. Liz,
Now,
are you going
before
to?
we go, before we move on to what are we on about, I do want to let people know that Rote is now moving into the movie reaction space. So I just finished recording our very first reaction with queer sci-fi author Albert Nothlet, and we just did Kanye and Carla as our first outing. He had never seen it, and it's wonderful because he told me in the pre-show before we started recording, he says, I know nothing about actors, I know nothing about, so he literally is going into it green, which I love because I've seen a lot of these movies that I have almost 700 queer films in my catalog, my personal catalog. Yeah. So people say, oh, I wish there were more queer movies. Child, you need to come see my library. Trust me, I got a lot of shit over here. There's a lot more out there than you think there is. But I love it because in our reactions, we're going to have that duality of someone like me who has seen these films, who has a lot of knowledge about the stuff that goes on around. And now we're seeing it also with someone who has absolutely no knowledge about it, which I think is a really great combination and I think can make for really stimulating reactions. So we're going to put the full unedited version up on our Patreon. So I highly recommend people, if they want to start catching the full version of our reactions. And this one was funny. Albert really let loose. I saw a very, very joyous side to Albert that I had not seen before. So it is bringing things out in some of our guests, and I hopefully will have other people that will join me for reactions. So, but the first one will go up on Patreon, and then shortly I will have an edited version that will be available on the Rote channel under our new reactions playlist. So let people know about it if you're into watching reaction videos. It's something that we're moving into, and if you have recommendations, we're all ears. We will be moving to do the season 2 of Sense8 very shortly, but we want to get a few films under our belt so we can get all the technical stuff worked out between the first few movies before we start hitting the TV series, so that way we can smoothly move through the series of Sense8, wrapping it all up. So that's our word on our new venture.
Nice. Liz, do you want to stick around and share what won your week and what you're on about and our crazy little almost newsworthy segment?
Sure.
Almost. Just a little bit.
I can start. What I'm on about this week, 2 things. 1, anybody who tries to tell me climate change isn't a thing can go suck it. I know just a week ago I mentioned the ice castles in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. They've now been closed because temperatures have been so up and down that the ice is no longer stable. It was cracking and dangerous for humans to go visit. So less than a week after the announcement came out, it's closed. People can't go see it. So anyone who tries to tell me climate change isn't something we need to focus on, I'm going to come out and say it. Wrong. Dead wrong. If you're telling me we can't focus on it, that just means you're greedy.
Yeah. And an asshole.
How about you guys?
Okay, so mine is actually combo. So let's go with Liz first, and then, because mine is, what am I on about, is also the Who Won My Week. So
Okay.
they're tied.
Well, I hope it's not too taboo, but I'm actually going to talk about another podcast.
No, go for it.
Okay. So this week I have just blazed through a podcast that's put on by Serial and This American Life. It's called S-Town, and it's told by investigative journalist Brian Reed. I'm going to give you a little bit of the blurb so you can get what I'm talking about. So it's about a man named John B. McLemore who despises his Alabama town and decides to do something about it. So he asks Brian Reed to come investigate the son of a wealthy family who's allegedly been bragging that he got away with murder. But then someone else ends up dead, and the search for the truth leads to a nasty feud, a hunt for hidden treasure, and unearthing of a mystery of John B.'s life. So initially, John B. contacted Brian to come investigate the shit town, is what he calls it. But ultimately, John B. himself becomes he's just so central to it. He takes over the whole thing.
Interesting.
He's a closeted bisexual man stuck in what he refers to as Shittown, Alabama.
I wonder if it's near
Another
Gearingtown.
person who's interviewed.
It's a Broadway show. I just thought it was interesting.
So one of the people who's interviewed, when he's talking about John B., who's closeted bisexual in Alabama, he says he's got a little sugar in his tank, and to kind of reveal that he's, bi. And I just found that kind of endearing. I'd never heard that phrase before. But anyway, I love investigative journalism. I love podcasts, and this one really delivered. I was so riveted by John B. himself. He's just a total live wire. He really drew me into his life and his perspective about the world, including climate change.
Yay!
Vance. On top of the murder mystery that he had Brian come down and look for. So hit John's true, real life story is very heartbreaking, and the whole thing's very compelling.
That sounds like
so. It's kind of like Murders in the Building, only it's like you're actually doing what the Murders in the Building are, because they're hooked on true crime podcasts too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Right.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so my Who Won the Week and what am I on about? So there was an article that was published out on, let me just pull that up real quick. This is pinknews.co.uk, which is one of the queer kind of like news aggregators out of Britain. Evidently, Dan Levy's been talking about his career early, pre Schitt's Creek and pre Canadian baking show. This, I guess, his early days, he was working on MTV Live, but it was for Canada. And what I thought was rather interesting is that he was having to hide his sex. He was personally out, but not publicly in his career wise. And he said he was dealing with homophobia in 2015, no less, where he said it was kind of like, and this is a quote from him, it was kind of like conform to the culture of the workplace or sit it out. And this is while he was working for MTV Live. He said it was never like, let's pause what we're doing and listen to you. He said, I remember walking into work one day and someone asked me what I did on the weekend. And I said, well, I installed a dimmer switch in my apartment. And that person said, wow, it's almost like you're a real man. So I kind of like that he is using his platform in that he's able to bring to light that it wasn't so long ago that even, and in Canada, no less, we were dealing with those issues. And he said later on in the article, he said there wasn't even anybody I could go to, like HR or whatever, because the training just wasn't there, And so I like that he's letting people know, hey, we may think we've come a long way, and we have, but it was not so long ago where we as queer people were still dealing with this shit. And so he won my week, and I also am on about him using his platform to actually still engage in those conversations. So Dan Levy is a superhero in the queer world, as far as I'm concerned. Move over, Henry Cavill. Well, not so far, Henry Cavill. We do love you, but
All right. Well, my Won the Week are those journalists and talking heads who are able to dig through the mountains of crap coming out of the House of Representatives and Senate and say, okay, here's what they're saying. Here's what they're going to do to you. Here's the economic projection of what that's going to do to our nation. So I sent Bez a link to Brian Tyler.
I will put it up.
Yeah. So Brian Tyler Cohen is one of these that I actually really appreciate, because though he is very liberal, he actually will just take a look at it and say, okay, here's what they're proposing. Here's what this really says. And here's what the effect is. And in this case, it's McCarthy's concept of removing the IRS and taxing everybody a flat 30% sales tax on everything across the board. One, we lose the income tax from the super wealthy, because they're not going to buy $1,000 loaves of bread to make up for the difference. So it's going to force our nation deeper into debt. in terms of our national debt. It's going to put all of the burden on the people who can't afford bread in the first place, because now everything they need to purchase is 30% more expensive. And that's going to hurt a lot. It's going to force us to cut funding to programs that we need. The list went on and on as to how bad this decision was. And I really appreciated the fact that he was able to distill out from what had been said on the floor into normal speak and say, okay, folks, why? Tell me why this is good. Tell me why this idea would make you happy, because I don't see it. That wins my week. Anybody who can do that. How about you, Liz, now that I've brought the floor down?
Person who won my week was a Los Angeles teacher named Kristen Sherhad. He took his 3-year-old son, Ashton, to get a mani-pedi.
Aww.
Doesn't seem like a big deal to us, right? Like, that's not a big deal to us. But he did it because his son had already liked having his nails painted and went to preschool. And the preschool teacher told the boy that painting your nails is only for girls. Sherhad, aside from being a school teacher, also happens to be a huge TikToker with over 900,000 followers. So he made a video of it and talked about the whole situation. And one thing he said was, he said, I really just wanted to make sure, and he's talking about his son here, I really just wanted to make sure that he didn't have guilt or shame, because it is something that he enjoys. And we've done it together multiple times. He also added that he wants to make sure his son enjoys his life to the fullest at his age, and doesn't have to have strict gender norms. So some of the trolls came out in the comments,
of course,
but for the most part, there were like 14,000 commentators. And for the most part, they were all very much in support of Ashton having pretty pink nails and doing what he wants.
I love that. Thank you for bringing hope back to the show that I darkened.
Well, and I want to second what you said, Vance. I'm enjoying that both the late night talk show hosts and the even the MSNBC anchors, I'm noticing that they are getting comic gold out of the House committee meetings. I mean, this stuff is writing it for them. They don't really have to poke fun at it because it is so horribly bad on how they're approaching their committee and their weaponization stuff, that it's just comedy gold because they're so stupid, and the Democrats are just wiping the floor with them because they just don't know how to even do what they're trying to do. It's so poorly done. And I second what you're saying, and I like the fact that the news is also piling on and saying, look at this shit. It's stupid. This is what you voted for? Wake up, America. And I like the fact that they're able to use the humor in, much along the line of the Daily Show, which has been doing it since way when Jon Stewart first started it. But I like that the news itself is saying, excuse me? And they're pointing to what's going on, and they're like, are you seeing this? Are you watching what I'm watching? And I kind of like that they're making it that accessible. I mean, I don't necessarily want my news to become entertainment in that way all the time, but I think it's nice that they're actually, for once, just going, are you watching? Are you paying attention? Are you looking at this and really understanding what's going on here? And that, I think, is probably the most valuable thing they could do right now. So.
Well, that and get Liz's teacher on the news, because that guy deserves a medal.
Absolutely.
All right. Any final words of wisdom from either of you?
Watch The Daily Show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
I would like to say, if you have children in your life, help them live without shame. What they want to do is probably 100% harmless, and they're just enjoying it. Support that.
Let them fly.
Exactly. All right.
Well said.
Thanks. We want to extend a huge thank you to Liz Faraim for being with us this month, but specifically for taking the hot seat this episode. Thank you, Liz, so much.
On a moment's notice.
Unexpectedly. Yes.
Hey, Liz, center stage, go.
Right? All right, now you. All right, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about these artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Follow us on YouTube. There's more stuff going on there now than ever before. Like I said, Baz is adding the new reactions with Albert Nothlet and other guests in the future. If you like reaction videos, well, hold on to your gut because they're kind of funny. Other than that, like, subscribe. If you liked Tell It to the Bees and want to support some bee swag, we've got some at our store.
Yes.
Baz has added several bee designs that I think you will appreciate. So please go look at those. But, like, subscribe. Thank you so much for being here today. Tune in next week for your Queer Media Fix.
Bye-bye.
What's that? Closing time. Bum's Rush and Melody, dear.